Is it Michael? Hi there, everyone, and welcome to the Norwalk Midseason Showdown. Can we turn we have Patrick Smith up against Jackson Finch for our first round of the day. I'm Gavin Michaels, joined today by
Regina Ingley. It's nice to be here. Happy New Year to everybody out there. So for our first round, we got Jackson on your left side with that Manectric, Tapu Fini, Celesteela, Landorus T, Tyranitar, and Hitmontop. And on Patrick's, we've got the Tapu Fini, Amoonguss, Landorus T, Tyranitar, Zapdos, and Metagross.
So, one interesting thing about this matchup is that on Jackson's side, we have the potential for 3 Intimidators, assuming that the Manectric is Mega, which, I mean, you probably assume considering that it is a Manectric, and he can just keep cycling that in and out. One thing that I think is going to be key for this matchup is the fact that Jackson has that Celesteela, and Patrick's only real way to hit that Celesteela appears to be his own Zapdos, which could be a bit of trouble considering that Jackson has Lightning Rod on the Manectric. So it's going to be I think the real story of this game is going to just be seeing how Patrick deals with that Celesteela.
Right, and I think like Patrick's team, we've kind of seen from like previous formats, it's semi-standard, I think, and I think Jackson's has a little bit more leeway and a little bit better. It's got a little bit more things that we've seen from 17 here. I like the inclusion of the Celesteela. It's not something that I would expect on the teams that we for like this 18 format right now.
Yeah, no, Celesteela definitely. I mean, we saw it a whole bunch in 2017, but with there being so many options, it feels like people kind of forgot just how much of a beast Celesteela can be, especially if you don't have a way to hit it super effectively. So that could be an oversight in some people's team building, and that might be what Jackson's banking on. All right.
We'll see what happens in this first match. So hopefully we do get to see that Celesteela, especially since the items that it was running like last season, it might change up coming into 18 right here. Yeah. So alright, so we're going to have these Pokemon out soon. I'm really hoping to kind of see his strategy for those Intimidators coming out. So we've got Patrick's Amoonguss and that Tapu Fini, so we're going to have that Misty Train up, and we've got Tapu Fini and Manectric, so interesting leads right there.
Yeah, the Manectric Tapu Fini combination is something that we've been seeing a surprising amount, especially considering that Manectric isn't really the most popular Pokemon, just because the Lightning Rod helps Fini take attacks because it doesn't have to deal with Thunderbolts. Unfortunately, it's looking down on the Amoonguss right now, which really has free reign to do whatever it wants. So Patrick's putting on a lot of early pressure because the Manectric can also just be Rage Powdered away so that his Fini has all the space to do what it wants. So Jackson's really the person here who's forced to respond to Patrick because he has to, I mean, you have to respect the Sludge Bomb, you have to respect the Rage Powder.
So we do see that Mega Manectric coming out, which I don't think was much of a surprise to anybody coming into this because of the Mega Evolutions being allowed in this format. I think the choice of both of them leading with Fini kind of is an answer to both sides teams on there.
Yeah, the one thing is though, is that now, if for later on, he's not going to be able to use the Lightning Rod to redirect the Thunderbolt from Zapdos, assuming that he brought it. Big damage on the Fini though.
Right, so that Volt Switch coming out onto the Fini doing a lot of really good damage, letting Jackson kind of choose to see if he has anything to answer to Amoonguss. So that is going to be his Celesteela coming out.
Yeah, I mean, you're assuming that a Sludge Bomb is going to come into that slot, either that or onto the Fini. You don't expect the Spore to come in because Misty Train being out. I see when missing the Amoonguss,
right,
it's a little bit damaged.
I like the seed on Celesteela though, so it's a really nice kind of combination that you can have up there. And I think that Icy Wind kind of missing is going to be really interesting to see how that plays on later. I like the fact that Tapu Fini does get Icy Wind in this format. It's a really nice form of speed control since it hit both opponent. So Sludge Bomb did come in. It hits the Tapu Fini instead of the Manectric slot though, not doing as much damage.
It's not doing much damage. What it does do is it makes it so that Patrick's Tapu Fini, which now has the Moon Blast up, is in a position where it can really do a lot here, especially because Jackson's Celesteela can be redirected away by the Amoonguss. Right now, Patrick's main focus is making so that his Fini can dish out as much damage as possible, and maybe this is his way of getting around only having one thing to really hit the Celesteela super effectively, is by boosting up the Tapu Fini. He can get a lot of big damage in with those powerful water-type moves. So if you're Jackson here, you probably expect to focus down onto the Amoonguss so that later on you are going to be able to deal with the Fini. Because right now Fini is threat number 1, but you just can't touch it right
because
now.
Because that Amoonguss is out there, like with the bunch of Rage Powder. But he's withdrawing that Amoonguss and sending out Landorus.
Yeah, that's a bit surprising actually. I mean, you want to get the Intimidate so that Tapu Fini can live the Heavy Slam, but I don't know, that it's a little bit more risky than just going for the Rage Powder.
I agree with that, because I think it's interesting, because I feel like Celesteela and Tapu Fini aren't Pokemon that would usually like run any sort of like heavy attacking moves that would benefit from Intimidate. So we get the Icy Wind hitting both Pokemon, doing a good amount of damage to Landorus, not as much to Fini, and Acrobatics coming out, so doubling that. Oh, so close, proccing the berry on Patrick's side.
Yeah. And there you can see the value of switching the Landorus and making it so that Tapu Fini is always going to be able to at least activate its berry off and get a Scald off. So Scald isn't going to be doing too much to the Celesteela, and without the burn, that could just be considered negligible at this point, especially because Landorus T probably isn't doing too much here. Based off of that damage, it looks like it's more of a bulkier Landorus T, so if you don't have to fear the Tectonic Rage, then really Jackson's in a spot where he can just dish out as much damage as he wants, because the Amoonguss can't even really switch in because it has to fear the Acrobatics coming in from the Celesteela. So you've got to figure that Patrick's fourth Mon has to be coming out here.
And nice call there. So we have that Metagross coming out. Shiny Metagross. I really like the color on that. So it's probably going to be that Mega right there. Tapu Fini being protected on Patrick's side. Really good call. Probably fearing a lot of things from Jackson's side because that Celesteela is out there. And we saw it do a lot of damage from before. So the Leech Seed showing itself on Jackson's side, probably wanting to keep the Celesteela around later and wanting to like maybe force Patrick out for a switch out later.
Right, yeah. I think the biggest thing to note here is that Patrick didn't actually bring the Zapdos, so it's going to be a real question of what does he have to deal with this Celesteela, because Tapu Fini is really the only thing that's going to be doing damage to it unless he has a weird move on his Metagross. So yeah, I'm really unsure as to how he can deal with the Celesteela, especially because we saw Jackson does have the Leech Seed, so it can be staying around here for a long while. But what the Metagross can do is it can put KO pressure onto the Tapu Fini depending on what moves it's using and, well, how much bulk the Fini has.
Alright, so we see the Metagross coming out on Patrick's side using Iron Head into the Fini slot.
That's not going to be enough, no.
And then the Fini using Icy Wind again, so Jackson consistently using Icy Wind on these, doing a lot of speed control, probably to help the Celesteela out later.
Yeah.
I think what Patrick has to think about too is the fact that they both have Finis and that Celesteela has a Misty Seed.
Right. I mean, I think one thing to note there is that Jackson's Tapu Fini doesn't actually have Wiki Berry. It didn't get
proc.
Yeah, it didn't get proc earlier, so it just doesn't have it, and that's very interesting because that doesn't really look like Choice Specs damage either, considering that Icy Wind only did around half to Landorus T, so gonna be interesting to see what item it ends up being. We do see more damage coming out from Patrick's side, and Jackson's really not doing too much. The Icy Wind, sure, it lets it so that your Celesteela is faster than the Fini and the Metagross, but I'm not sure that you really care that your Celesteela is faster than the Fini and the Metagross. But I don't know, it's going to be interesting to see how Jackson takes advantage of that.
But I also think, like your point earlier about Patrick not having an answer to that Celesteela and his Celesteela and Jackson's Celesteela getting the Leech Seed on Metagross, so forcing Patrick, I guess, at this point to do that switch out and bringing back the Amoonguss.
Yeah, no, you don't want to give the Celesteela any more health. You need it to be as weak as possible so that you just have a chance of dealing with it.
So Jackson revealing the Landorus on his side for that Intimidate onto Patrick's Fini and Amoonguss. So what do you think of like that switching?
I mean, that's definitely the switch in that you make. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to make it so that your Celesteela turns to that is a big critical hit. Landorus T isn't going to be doing too much in general against Patrick's team, so it's probably a good idea to try to put it in a spot where it can take a hit, because right now the Manectric, now that the Celesteela is gone, which is the big obstacle for Patrick to overcome, Manectric has to be Jackson's way of winning this game. He just has to get rid of the Amoonguss, and you can reasonably see a path where Manectric is able to sweep through everything.
So I guess we saw Patrick's answer to that Celesteela is just Scalded until it fails.
Yeah, until you get a crit. I mean, hey, 6% of the time it works every time.
There you go. So hopefully Jackson can take care of that Amoonguss if he wants to kind of keep this battle at a pace where he can demand some sort of damage coming out here.
Yeah, but the problem is that Misty Terrain is gone, so Amoonguss is free to spore whatever it wants. And unless we have something like the Overheat on Manectric or the Supersonic Sky Strike on Landorus T, Amoonguss is really free to do whatever it wants here. You could see Jackson try to bait out a Protect onto the Tapu Fini, or say, oh hey, this Amoonguss is just going to spore, I'm going to attack into the Fini with my Manectric and try to get a cheeky KO that way, but right now it really seems like this is Amoonguss' show.
So we got the Rage Powder coming out on Patrick's side, so just going to direct all the attacks towards Amoonguss. So Flamethrower, though, nice call on Jackson's side. Hopefully does a considerable amount of damage to that Amoonguss.
That is a lot.
And nice.
Yeah.
So U-turn from Landorus doesn't KO, but it does proc the berry, and we will see that Landorus going back into Jackson.
Yeah, so what Patrick's doing there is he's just trying to make it so that his Feeny stays up. Right now he's really trying to prioritize the Feeny, which I don't necessarily think I agree with, but his game plan has to be Feeny-centric if he's prioritizing that over Zone Amoonguss. Okay, Misty Terrain is coming back up, so that was Jackson's way of dealing with the potential Spore, just making it so that if you try to go for it, Misty Terrain would have been up, so that's pretty clever there.
Right, so the Scald coming in from Patrick's Tapu Fini is picking up the KO on Jackson's Fini, so we will see like that other Intimidator coming out, so both of his Intimidators are going to be out on the field, not going to be able to do anything to Patrick's Landorus that's in the back right now.
Yeah, I mean, you have to double Intimidate out, but Patrick has 2 Special Mons out, so you're not getting too much out of the utility here. And while you do have the tools to knock out the Amoonguss, you gotta wonder at what cost. Because you're not gonna be able to KO the Feeny, and Feeny is still has that boost. So it's going to be able to do big damage, maybe not knock out, however, whatever it wants to, and that's going to be very difficult for Jackson to deal with. You could see something like a Protect Earthquake, or maybe if the Landorus has Protect, it could go for it. Just something to try to get around it. We see the Protect onto the Amoonguss here. A bit of a risky play in case he goes for the T-Bolt, but it's a great read. Makes it so that the Flamethrower not going to be able to take out the Amoonguss.
Rock Slide coming in from Jackson's Landorus, though, wants at least some damage onto Patrick's Pokemon on there, because that Fini, again, has been doing a lot of damage to Jackson.
Plus,
getting the flinch.
30% chance to just be a good player. Cannot take away that possibility.
Kind of evens out that critical hit from earlier.
Yeah, that's how Jackson will think of it, at least. So, I mean, it's still pretty much the same spot, though. You're still not going to be able to knock out the Tapu Fini unless you go for the Protect Earthquake, but then the Amoonguss will be able to get a free Spore off. So, all in all, Flinch is cool. It helped him not just lose that turn, but you have to wonder, okay, where do you go from here?
Right.
Because it's not just about the 2v2. Patrick also has two
more Pokemon.
Yeah, you still have the half-health Landorus and the pretty much full Metagross in back, and that's going to be so difficult to deal with if you're Jackson. So you can't just be thinking of, oh, how do I beat this 2v2? You have to think of, how do I get myself where I have enough HP to actually deal with what's in back?
So, like, I don't think Jackson's out of the game yet, but I think he'll have to really consider all those options right now.
Yeah.
And if he's thinking about that, you know, what can he do about that? And he possibly in in that next match.
Yeah, no, it's definitely a tough spot for him. He's gonna have to try to play this pretty much perfectly if he wants to be able to win this. I mean, if you're Jackson here, I don't know if you necessarily regret your game plan, though. You were trying to just play around the Celesteela, and maybe you could have had your partners be a little bit more aggressive as opposed to the Tapu Fini just going for the Icy one. But look at what Patrick brought. He didn't really have anything to really deal with the Celesteela, especially at +1 special defense, besides getting that critical hit.
Well, and I think Patrick's use of the Protect for the Amoonguss in that last turn was also something that kind of important, because he anticipated Jackson going after that Amoonguss.
Wait, what's up again?
And everything happening on that. So I think Patrick choosing to protect the Amoonguss and then letting his Fini get some damage off, though. Good call for Jackson's Flamethrower on that side.
Who disconnected?
So. Sorry.
Okay, so we had double game freeze, as you can tell by us being on the screen for a very long time. So I believe, is Patrick getting the one?
We just very much enjoy looking at these 4 Pokemon consistently. But.
Okay, yeah. According to the official Pokemon rulebook, a 4-2 game state when there is a double freeze is considered a tie. So this game is going to be considered null and void, which is, I mean, it's unfortunate because, I mean, Patrick definitely looked like he was in the stronger position there. So I'm not necessarily sure why 4-2 results in a tie, but... Oh, fun. This is going to be an issue we're going to deal with all season.
I think it's possibly the potential that if you look at Pokemon games, they're not really done until that last Pokemon's faded or something.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's definitely more on the side of caution, where it's like, you don't want to...
assume that just because someone has a full team that you can't come back from that 2 Pokemon deficit.
Yeah, exactly, because you absolutely can. It's just relatively uncommon. It's just unfortunate that this discussion happened. Hopefully...
Everybody's freezing!
Okay. Oh my god.
So, I'm wondering then, too, because Jackson did have those Pokemon at full health, so he could have, if he made those perfect reads, and if he had, like, you know, that random generator, like, on his side, he could have come back from that. So maybe that's probably why, like, that 4-2 results in a tie.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. It's just... God. Yeah, you're good to go. it's just so scary seeing it happen to so many people
Right.
all at once.
Like, I think that's four tables? Four tables. All right. Well, so again, on your screen, we've got Jackson's Mega Manetric, that Tapu Fini, the Celesteela, Landorus, Tyranitar, Hitmontop, and on Patrick's, you've got the Fini and Amoonguss, the Landorus, Tyranitar, Zapdos, and Metagross.
Yeah, so you could say, I mean, Patrick could go with the same thing. I mean, he was definitely going to win that game, but
But if you're Jackson.
Yeah, if you're Jackson, like, you feel pretty good about what you did. Playing around the Celesteela is definitely correct here, especially if Patrick doesn't bring the Zapdos. So it's going to be interesting to see if Patrick decides, hey, I need to make the adjustment and bring the Zapdos in so I have a more reliable answer to the Celesteela, or if he says, no, last game, my game plan of just setting up my Tapu Fini was definitely good enough to beat the Celesteela. So that's going to be one of the more interesting dynamics here. I mean, if you're Jackson, you could say the Celesteela mode didn't work out so well because the rest of the team was having to play passive because of it. So,
but I think a lead change might also be like expected from this, because if you don't send out that Celesteela Fini, then you'd have to switch in and you'd have to have your Celesteela take any sort of hits on there.
Yeah.
So the same lead from Patrick in game one, we've got that Amoonguss and Tapu Fini, and now we've got that Celesteela and Tapu Fini on Jackson's side. So we are going to see that berry getting that seed getting procced from Celesteela, and we've got Misty Terrain up on the field.
Yeah, I don't think the Amoonguss Fini lead can be a surprise from Patrick. Clearly, that's his team's strongest mode versus this kind of stuff, because if he can set up the Tapu Fini, there isn't much that Jackson can do to touch it. Jackson, however, deciding not to lead with his own Mega Manetric, possibly either he could potentially not be bringing it, or he could be saving it, expecting a Zapdos from Patrick's side, so you would need the Manetric in order to redirect the Thunderbolt. But as is, the Amoonguss is in a pretty good spot to just go for a Spore onto the Celesteela, and at least force the Celesteela to switch out. Fini can Calm Mind up here for free, and there's not much that Jackson can do about it.
Which I think is what he's suffering from, because that's what happened in that last match that we had seen.
Yeah.
So the Zapdos he did bring this time. So I think interesting changes for Patrick on this one. So I'm glad we are seeing that Zapdos, because he understands.
Misty Seed.
Oh, so double Misty Seed up out here. And I think Patrick understanding that Jackson's team kind of semi-revolves around that Celesteela, and then bringing the Zapdos as an answer.
Right, it definitely seems like a much stronger approach, especially if you're able to set up the Calm Minds, and this is great positioning for Patrick. Sure, you take the Icy Wind, but Zapdos is threatening KOs versus, well, maybe not KOs, but a hefty amount of damage versus both Jackson's Tapu Fini and Celesteela. Since both of them rely on their bulk so much, and neither of them have one of those 50% berries, it's going to be, I mean, Jackson has to respect the Thunderbolt. And he does have tools to deal with it. We saw that he had the Landorus last game, and he has the Manetric, potentially. We don't know if he brought it this game, or the Landorus, but those are both safe switch-ins from this Thunderbolt. The thing is, you can take a Thunderbolt, sure, but how are you going to be beating the +1 Fini?
Right. Like, because Patrick did get that Calm Mind up this turn, and like that Zapdos, just kind of did not take almost any damage at all from Celesteela's acrobatics, and I think Jackson now is like in that area where he has to be really scared about that. But I also think that's probably why he's been icy winding, is the potential for any sort of tailwind that is usually common on Zapdos.
Right, no, he completely shuts that option down, and he makes it so that if he is able to get his Manetric in safely, it's going to be able to put on a lot of pressure versus the Zapdos and the Fini. So you see the Icy Wind going up again, basically making it so that if Patrick does decide to tail when he's not getting any value of it, Heat Wave coming out instead. Yeah, so that's right there is Patrick just being real safe, does not want to give Manetric the Lightning Rod boost. Leech Seed coming out onto the Fini.
Connecting onto the Patrick's Fini.
That's big. Yeah, that puts Fini onto a timer.
We're getting another Calm Mind up, so he's going to have to do as much damage as he can and get that Celesteela out, probably.
Yeah, I think that if you're Patrick, you have to be focusing your resources on getting rid of the Celesteela, because you don't want to get rid of your Calm Mind boost onto Tapu Fini. Being at +2 is so important, and you're really not going to be able to get another chance to set that up again, especially if your Zapdos is going to be taking a lot of damage. So if you have Roost on your Zapdos, I think that you could see Patrick busting that out, but a double from Jackson onto the Zapdos could just knock it out entirely. So it could just be that by trying to play safe and avoiding T-bolting into the Manetric, Patrick really put himself at a disadvantage where now he just can't do anything to get rid of that Celesteela.
And I think what Patrick also has to think about is what Jackson has in that back, because if he switches out if Jackson switches out for that Celesteela and gets like that Leech Seed for like Fini and has something to answer for that Zapdos, then it's going to put a lot more pressure on Patrick. So I think as unfortunate it was for that game freezing, I think it gave Jackson a lot of like really good time to reconsider his options.
But you see another Icy Wind coming out. Jackson just really wanting to make sure his Mons are faster. Is that Zapdos going to be in range for a Celesteela KO, though? That's going to be the big question here. So we do see the
acrobatics.
Acrobatics. Is this going to be enough? It
Nice.
is. Okay, and now that's massive for Jackson because effectively Jackson just got rid of all of Patrick's ways of dealing with the Celesteela,
Beast boost.
except for a Scald crit. So now,
Attack Beast Boost.
yeah, that is not something that we were used to seeing in 2017. But hey, new year, new Celesteela. Maybe that's the new norm. Moonblast going out onto the Tapu Fini though is an interesting decision. You could say that that's respecting the Manectric switch out, but at this point, you kind of have to think, you need to get damage onto the Celesteela. If you aren't scalding the Celesteela, what are you doing to get rid of it?
Like, especially now that Patrick's lost his one answer to that Celesteela. Like, even though we saw last match, like, the Scald doing a lot of damage, and that Finny is at +2 though, so I think I'm gonna have to be a little bit worried about that for Jackson.
Sure, but you're still also at +1 because of the Misty Seed, and that makes it so that if Patrick isn't able to crit, you can tank for a long time. But the Tapu Fini on your side isn't doing much right now, admittedly. It's not going to be doing much for the rest of the game besides spamming Icy Wind. So it's going to be interesting to see if Jackson decides to switch it out, potentially risk getting hit by the Tapu Fini in order to put something that can be a little bit more of an aggressive partner, help Celesteela out here.
Right. So Patrick coming in with his Amoonguss on here, so he could get that Spore onto that Celesteela and kind of like going after it. So Jackson going for a Protect on a Celesteela.
That's fair enough. Yeah, he can't take any damage that way.
And, you know, he's going to get back, like, drain that health off of that Tapu Fini because of the Leech Seed.
Yeah, and worst case scenario, you end up sacking your Tapu Fini, which you don't mind anyways. The Tapu Fini isn't going to be useful for you anymore. If you can get rid of it and get something more active in here, that's just a win for you. Let's see what Patrick decides to go for here. Does decide to Scald.
The Scald into the Protect on the Celesteela, so good turn for Jackson right here, making a
great
really
turn
good
for him,
call on that one.
Yeah, so it's basically just free damage dishing out through the Leech Seed and through the Icy Wind. It's not very much damage, but since you have such an advantage here, if you're Jackson, every little bit just puts more and more pressure onto Patrick. And now Celesteela can get a massive hit off. It does have that +1 attack boost, so it's going to be doing a ton of damage, especially because Patrick didn't even bring an Intimidator yet, which is uncommon in this format. So you have a pure, unadulterated attack boost that it can abuse. So it's going to be interesting to see what he decides to target here. He could try to knock out the Amoonguss, make so he can't get Spored, or you could just say, screw it, the Fini is the only threat to me, I'm just going to try to target it down.
Well, the hard thing for Patrick, I think, too, is that he's got that he got the 2 Calm Minds off on his Fini, and so that's not something you, like you said, that you want to lose. So Jackson coming out with that Landorus, getting the Intimidate off of the Amoonguss, and the Tapu Fini on Patrick's side of the field. Yeah,
so right there, that's just Jackson saying, okay, he's not going to be targeting my Tapu Fini, he's not going to give me the free switch, so I'm going to just manually go into a more active partner. In this way, it makes it so that he's going to go for the Acrobatics onto the Amoonguss, but with the Leech Seed recovery, that would put the Tapu Fini into range for a KO from the Earthquake. So that's just a very smart game plan.
Getting the burn, though, on
that is
Celesteela.
massive.
So Patrick coming in with that, so that is a lot of damage to get for that Celesteela, and getting the burn to negate sort of that attack boost that it got from the Beast Boost.
Yeah, no, Patrick absolutely needed to get a burn off here to try to get back into the game, because now Jackson doesn't even have that strong option of doubling into the Amoonguss, because Acrobatics isn't going to be doing as nearly enough damage. One thing that is a little bit of a bright side for Jackson is now you don't have to worry about the Spore coming off onto your Celesteela, but I think
at the cost of getting that attack deficit.
Because it's not just the attack deficit, it means that you can't stall out so much with Leech Seed, because endgame, if it's Celesteela versus Tapu Fini, Jackson can just go for Leech Seed or Protect, Attack, Protect, Attack, Protect, and just wipe out 25% of Tapu Fini's health at a time. Now he just can't do that because he's losing HP at the same time. He can't recover quite as reliably.
So Earthquake coming out on
is that going to be enough?
Jackson's side. And picks up the knockout on Finny, does some damage to the Amoonguss.
Crit might have mattered, depends how that Landorus G is trained, however. Acrobatic's going to come in with the attack boost. It is going to be able to KO, even though it's burned, so that's massive. Yeah.
So Patrick in a tougher position to come. That's getting another Beast Boost for Celesteela on Jackson's side. And that burn is gonna, kind of cycle out later on, and we don't have that Leech Seed recovery anymore for Jackson, and we know that it doesn't have any sort of leftovers. So we, like you said, we don't see that stall that we saw back in 17.
Yeah, and now, I mean, it's 4v1. Even if there's a double disconnect, Patrick will get the win. So it's gonna be Jackson will get the win. Yeah. So it's going to be very difficult for Patrick to come back from this, and pretty much impossible. And you do see the forfeit come back.
But good choice, I think, on Patrick's side, though, because you don't want to reveal any sort of Metagross information on there. We know it's Omega, and that's about it. Jackson, I think, doing a good job of kind of recovering and understanding what he needed to do to kind of counteract this team on there.
Yeah, no, what he did a much better job of making it so that his Celesteela was in an active state, and he wasn't just doing little leech seeds that would get switched out, because he had a more aggressive Pokemon next to it. Or at least, maybe you could say this was Patrick's fault, that he was just letting Icy Wind from the Tapu Fini do much more than it was earlier. Because Patrick really wasn't playing around his Amoonguss, and that really gave Jackson a lot of time to set up there.
So on Jackson's side, the two Pokemon that we haven't seen is that Tyranitar and the Hitmontop. So not as much as Cycling Intimidates that I think that we were expecting. And then on Patrick's side, we haven't seen that Tyranitar yet either. So I wonder what Patrick's thinking going into this, and what changes he's deciding to make against Jackson's team.
Right, because if you're Patrick, you brought the Zapdos here. Technically, that should have been better against the Celesteela than what happened in the first game that had the double disconnect. So you're gonna have to play around that a little bit harder. I don't think we'll see the Tyranitar coming in, just because that's pretty much food for the Celesteela. Yeah, Celesteela and the Fini. But you could say, hey, maybe it's possible that Jackson, for some reason, doesn't have Heavy Slam. We saw the Acrobatics, the Leech Seed, and the Protect. We haven't seen that fourth move. So it could, in theory, be something weird. It's unlikely, but it's possible. And if that's what Patrick's thinking, that could be something to abuse to get ahead.
I will also say that Patrick was really smart, because not using an electric type move, because we know that Jackson had that Manectric. And so if you use electric move and help Jackson get that Lightning Rod boost, that's also something you have to worry about.
Yeah, it's something to be worried about, but what Jackson did such a good job of is he sort of played off of the fear. He knew that he could be able to just sit there and force Patrick to waste an attack, just because the pressure of the Manectric is so much stronger than the Manectric itself. Differently entirely here now.
All right, yeah, so really fun here. I think so Landorus is on both sides, and then Amoonguss and Manectric. I like the fact that we get mirror lead, we get at least half of a mirror lead each round, because I think it's really interesting to see two different Pokemon, two of the same Pokemon, but with to see how differently they're built.
Oh yeah, because what's interesting about it is that it really is played off of the mirror. The mirror is the important thing, but the action is going to be on the non-mirrored Pokemon there. You see them in Mega on Manectric coming out, no Pokemon switching here, so they're just going to be dishing out damage here. It's going to be real interesting to see what this results as.
Well, the Intimidate this time too, coming from the Mega Manectric onto a Landorus.
Yeah, that's much more value.
So protecting again on Jackson's side against Patrick's Pokemon on here, and we got a knockoff coming out from Jackson's side onto Patrick's Landorus. Ooh, revealing an Assault Vest.
Yeah, so what's cool about that is if Jackson is using the Hidden Power Ice, which isn't as common this format, but in previous years it kind of was, that makes it so that Landorus T could just be knocked out from it. We do see the Sludge Bomb onto the Landorus T as opposed to the Spore. Yes. Nice. So now, if you're Jackson, you don't even mind that, because that means that you're immune to Spore. And what Patrick was trying to do there was, he kind of expected the Landorus T to U-turn out, just to make it so that he couldn't get Spored.
Right.
But Jackson is just, I don't know. Patrick's trying to cover options that Jackson's not going for. And it's hard to tell whether Jackson just isn't willing to go for them, but we saw him go for the U-turn earlier on. Right. So it's more so that Jackson is just reading Patrick to make these coverage plays and is just calling him out because of it.
So the Rage Powder coming out on Patrick's side because he's going to take any sort of damage from there. And
we do see the Hidden Power Ice coming out, so that kind of shows why Jackson went for the knockoff setup earlier. And Earthquake, is he going to be knocking out his own Amoonguss here? Manectric should be able to live this, but Amoonguss, I mean, if it crit.
Right. Well, so I think what's interesting to them is that, so Jackson's Landorus had knocked off that berry, so I think really tough for Patrick, because now that Amoonguss isn't going to be around for very much longer.
Yeah, and without the Amoonguss, he's going to have a tough time buying turns against that Celesteela, which could be in the back, for all we know. But the more important thing is that Jackson just got rid of a lot of Patrick's bulk. So now if he just has any amount of damage dealers, which he can do by preserving his own Manectric, just go for a Rock Slide here, take out the Amoonguss, save Manectric for late game, there's not much that Patrick can really do to redirect it.
So Jackson switching out his Manectric for that Tapu Fini, and Patrick switching out his Landorus as well for Tapu Fini as well. So both of them just kind of, I think, afraid of these knockouts. Amoonguss protecting for Landorus's move, which using knockoff into that slot, wanted to pick up the KO but protecting. So both Tapu Finis are out again. And I just kind of enjoy the fact that they have those mirrors consistently.
Yeah, and what's really cool about that protect from Patrick is now he can go for the Rage Powder and set up his own Tapu Fini without risking being having his berry knocked off, or he could just decide to just KO the Landorus T. If you can trade your basically 1 HP Amoonguss for the Landorus T, that's a good trade for Patrick, and that's something that you'll absolutely take to get back into this game. And Jackson's Tapu Fini, all we've seen it really do is go for the Icy Wind, which isn't really something of much value here. So you could just be... That's a very interesting switch.
So we've got the switch into the Mega Manectric again on Jackson's side, getting Intimidate on both Pokemon on Patrick's side. Like you said, interesting choice because the Intimidate won't really do much to either of those. The Rage Powder coming out from the Amoonguss.
I mean, if he goes for the attack onto the Landorus here, then you just sack the Manectric. So this is a very dangerous play by Jackson, reading the Calm Mind extremely hard on Patrick's end. Let's see if he goes for it. The Scald is going to come out. That's going to wipe out the Manectric, and that's big for Patrick.
So not exactly what Jackson wanted to see on there, switching out for that Manectric. But Patrick in a good spot now, I think, to go after Jackson.
Yeah, no, now Jackson has very little that's actually putting pressure onto the Tapu Fini. He's kind of forced to try to get a knockoff on it, but that Metagross is going to outrun and knock out the Landorus T, so that's not going to be something that's going to be able to happen. And Jackson right there just played too aggressively. Like, he just, in his mind, assumed that the Tapu Fini was going to be going for the Calm Mind. And I don't know, I think he just really discounted the value that Patrick could get by scalding the Landorus T. Because even if you had the Rage Powder up, you need to make it so that next turn the Landorus T can't knock off the Tapu Fini. So, yeah.
So Patrick in a good position.
Oh, yeah, Patrick's in absolutely a great position. We don't know what Jackson's back is, and that could change things. But even if it's a Celesteela, the Tapu Fini is going to be free to set up a whole buttload of Calm Minds here. So it's going to be very difficult for Jackson to come back for this. He's going to pull out something incredible in the back.
So the Celesteela is coming out on Jackson's side, but also like last match we saw Patrick have that Mega Metagross, but we also didn't see any moves come out from
That's true. So we don't know if it's carrying any really big damaging moves. It could have the Ice Punch, which could just knock out the Landorus entirely. The Protect there is interesting, though. So that could just be Patrick covering in case it's a Choice Scarf, which is fair enough. You probably... Oh, we do see the Calm Mind come out, actually. So if it is Choice Scarf, then Patrick is taking a lot of damage. But if not, I mean... We don't know. I don't believe we saw the Landorus change moves, so the Choice Scarf is still a possibility here.
Right. Well, and I think though Patrick having that Calm Mind on this turn might be an okay thing because Jackson's Landorus is poisoned, so it is like to quote you earlier, on a timer now.
Yeah, it is going to die, but the Tapu Fini took a lot of damage that it didn't otherwise need to, and that could just be enough for Celesteela to be able to beat the Tapu Fini in the 1v1. Because Celesteela isn't just getting recovery from the Tapu Fini. The Metagross on Patrick's side, once it comes down to just facing off against the Celesteela, is going to become a liability. It's just going to become a juice box for Celesteela's Leech Seed. So it's going to be really interesting to see how Patrick is focusing down on the Celesteela. You see the Mega Metagross come out, which, no surprise. The thing here is it's going to be important to see what item Jackson has. So yeah, it is a Scarf. That's a lot of damage.
Gonna do a lot, maybe enough to...
It's not going to be able to take up a knockup, but that's a lot of damage, yeah. Patrick really needed to, the turn previously, Scald the Landorus T. If you're so concerned about the Scarf, you have to be willing to take the knockout on it. And right now, that's just a lot of damage. And that could just be sacking the advantage that you had. Landorus T is going to go down, though. So if you're able to get a big damage off with the Scald here, that could be enough to give you the win, but it's going to be much tougher than it would have otherwise been.
And no burn, but the Leech connects on Jackson's side to the Mega Metagross.
Leeching the Metagross is interesting there because, I mean, what you really want to be doing is putting Tapu Fini on a timer. What Leech Seed does do is it does kind of force the Metagross to switch out because it's on a much shorter timer. But
Jackson also has his Tapu Fini in the back too, so maybe he's afraid of that Mega Metagross.
That's fair, because Metagross is going to be doing more damage to it than the Tapu Fini, but I don't think that if you're Jackson that you should really be caring about your Tapu Fini so much as your Celesteela. Celesteela is going to be what's going to be getting the win here, and if you're able to take out the Tapu Fini, that's a lot more value. But now, due to Patrick taking so much damage from that Earthquake, Jackson might be in a good spot here. The momentum definitely shifted ways.
So Iron Head connecting from Patrick's side onto the... Whoa, getting
big
the
damage.
Ouch. And Moonblast coming out against...
That's plus
Patrick's
one. That could be enough to knock out.
Oh, my bad.
That is! Oh my
nice.
god.
Oh, so Patrick doing some considerable damage on that, and the Leech Seed coming out on Jackson's side onto Patrick's Tapu Fini. So I'm wondering, like, do you think Jackson can like actually take this still, even though?
I think Jackson won it. Because now the Leech Seed knocked out the Metagross. Patrick kind of needed to switch there. Because as is, Jackson is super free to just target down the Tapu Fini, and then it's just the Celesteela versus the Landorus T. It's Landorus T, Tapu Fini in the back for Patrick. So, I mean, unless Patrick gets a crit here, it's going to be extremely tough for him to take down Celesteela, because Celesteela is a tank, and you have to respect it. Like, it's favored in a 3v1.
So, interestingly enough, Patrick didn't bring that Zapdos in this one, so I guess he didn't consider that Celesteela as much of a threat, potentially, but was more afraid of the Patrick.
I mean, I think that he thought to himself, okay, I'm so afraid of going for those Thunderbolts in general because of the potential of Miniature. I'm not getting value out of my Zapdos. It's better for me to go off with this Landorus T and try to get some big Rock Slide flinches. And if we do see those big Rock Slide flinches, that could absolutely win Patrick the game. Scald coming out. Oh, big flinch. Oh. Yeah, that flinch is... It can't be overstated how big that is, because otherwise Jackson could have gotten enough damage off with the acrobatics onto the Fini that just a couple more turns of Leech Seed would be able to knock it out. But as is, it's just going to be taking a beating.
Yeah, and we saw that the Landorus and the Tapu Fini, their damage combined got him 2 half. So
yeah, it's interesting to see Jackson not go for the Protect here. I mean, it's clear that he's respecting the Calm Mind option, which Patrick did decide to go for here. So if he is able to get a Leech Seed off onto the Landorus T here, that could be enough to get a little bit more health. Yeah. Oh, that's another massive flinch.
Rough.
You hate to see that happen, unless you're Patrick. Yeah, Patrick loves to see that happen. So that's enough to give Patrick the win here, unless Jackson's able to pull off the Protect stall of his life. Because right now, the one thing he has going for him is that Patrick can't afford to go for another Calm Mind, so he could go for the Protect stall, but he decides not to. And it would have been tough for him to get enough HP anyways, but still, that is a rough way to lose it for Jackson.
Oh man, so Patrick picking up the KO with a Scald and picking up the win for this round. Jackson, I think he could have had that if those flinches hadn't shown up.
Yeah.
And that's just a rough way to just kind of end your matches, because Jackson played a good game.
Yeah, no, I think that if you're Jackson, you have to be happy with the way that you played that. But ultimately, Rock Slide is a super strong option. Wait, it's still 1-1, right? There we go. We're back to a tie now.
There we go. All right, cool. So the last match between them, and I'm wondering now though for Patrick, how much of a threat he considers that Celesteela, because we've seen it in all the matches against Jackson being that one Pokemon that he wants to protect.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Jackson's team is absolutely built around the Celesteela. We see the triple Intimidate. We see the Lightning Rod. We see the Misty Terrain activating its speed. And if you're Patrick, I feel like you have to go with a harder anti-Celesteela comp. You can't just rely on getting those rocks like flinches, but you just have to figure out a way to get more value out of your Zapdos. Because if you're constantly being afraid of Thunderbolting because of the Manectric and back, Zapdos isn't worth to bring. But if you can set it up with something like the Amoonguss so that you can threaten a Spore coming in, you can get enough that Zapdos is worth it. And I think that has to be what Patrick decides to go for here. You can't just be okay with winning off of a double Rock Slide flinch.
But I think also if you're on Jackson's side, you have to consider that Tapu Fini that Patrick's been bringing, because it's been doing a lot of damage.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. The Tapu Fini on Patrick's end has been able to get up Calm Minds just very reliably and 100% of the time. It's not going punished, and that's giving Jackson much more of a headache than it could be. If Patrick doesn't have the Tapu Fini setting up Calm Minds, then it's not. Then Jackson just wins with the Celesteela. We do see the original leads coming back though.
So I think it's really interesting options from them, because I think Jackson's last lead worked pretty well. That Celesteela and the Fini coming out in that first turn.
It definitely put more pressure onto the Amoonguss, because as is with the Rage Powder potential from the Amoonguss, Manectric really isn't going to be doing a whole lot here. It does have the Flamethrower, but at the very best, it's going to be knocking Amoonguss into range of its berry and just buying Tapu Fini more turns to set up Calm Mind. And really, Patrick doesn't care about his Amoonguss. We've seen that time and time again. He's more than willing to get rid of his Amoonguss if it means that he can get up a Calm Mind.
Well, but Patrick's been getting those Calm Minds up at the moments that he needs them, and I feel like Jackson hasn't been able to kind of answer any of those predictions.
So this one's supposed to be sudden death.
Oh, it's supposed to be sudden death on this one? Oh.
Do they know that?
No, they're about to find out. Okay, so the players are about to find out, just as we are, that this is actually a sudden death match. So.
Calm Mind might not be as effective here.
So, which, if you're Jackson, you're going after that Moonblast, you're not doing your icy winds like you've been doing,
That's
getting
a ton
the
of
special
damage.
attack, like drop on Patrick's. Alright.
Oh my! So they're just learning right now that it is going to sudden death. So
Oh, wait, Patrick sporing on Misty Terrain.
he absolutely
Was waiting for that Celesteela.
Yeah, Celesteela to come in. And now, I mean, if you're Patrick, you had a game plan going in where you could set up the calm minds, put pressure out, but now that it's sudden death, this is
Oh, man.
a lot harder. Because you're not going to be able to knock out any of Jackson's Pokemon, but Jackson...
If you're Jackson, you're like, okay, cool, sudden death, let's do this.
No, if you're Jackson, you'll take this all the way, every day. I mean, yeah, this is kind of a crazy turn of events, because Jackson probably would have lost game one if they played it out. Talafini is going to be switching out, doesn't want to risk any damage coming out onto it with a combination Boom Blast plus Sludge Bomb.
So the Celesteela coming out. If you're Patrick, you wish it had been a turn earlier that he had switched it out, and getting that Midseason on Jackson's side in there. Patrick protecting his Amoonguss and sending out Zapdos.
You can't afford to let Amoonguss die, because if it dies, you lose the game.
So this is interesting, because now on Jackson's side, you've got like the Zapdos Nightmare scenario with the electric type moves on Patrick's side.
Oh, and you see Jackson going for the Protect there. That's so interesting, because you would think that he would be free to just attack either one of them and not be knocked out by either. But instead, he decides to play passive and probably just afraid of the Moonblast crit from the Tapu Fini. And now Patrick's put himself into a great spot with the Zapdos, because
Celesteela's out there, and that Zapdos is gonna. Oh,
yeah.
It's not, because
it's not going to be able to knock it out because of the Misty Terrain, but it can do a ton of damage to it. And right now, since any KO can take it, you can't afford to play safe with stacking them on. It's just not an option. So we're going to see this.
Jackson's definitely going to be like,
Oh yeah, I mean, both players, really. You could see a potential Protect Tailwind coming out from Patrick's side as well. And really just, I mean, we've seen Patrick be extremely willing to play around this Tapu Fini before, so he could just decide, hey, Tapu Fini, that's my ride or die right now.
Right. And like the hardest part of this is right now,
Volt
just
Switch.
thinking, is the Volt Switch going to do enough damage?
It's
so
not
close.
enough.
I'm packing the berry on there, so Jackson's Magic is going to be going back. No Protect on a Celesteela from any sort of Zapdos damage.
Yeah, so if Patrick decides to just double into something, he could just win the game right here if he's willing to do it, which is just... It's a hard call to make. All right, let's see here.
All right, so Jackson taking his time to figure out what Pokemon he's switching out from the
You don't want to lose just by switching
nice.
in. Okay, you go into the Tapu Fini, which makes sense. You don't expect the Thunderbolt to come into it. Thunderbolt's coming into the Tapu Fini slot. That's going to live, but if he doubles into it, okay, Scald's coming out instead. That shouldn't be enough to KO, not even close. But as we saw before, no berry. We do see Heavy Slam coming out onto the Tapu Fini. That shouldn't be enough to KO, but both Tapu Finis are at critical health right now. And
this is just I think rough for both of them right now. But Patrick did a good job, I think, doubling up into the slots. Wishing it was that Manectric, but.
Yeah, I mean, if he went for the Moonblast there instead of the Scald, he would have just won. I mean, he went for the Scald so that if he wanted to Landorus, Jackson would have just lost right away. But now it's so interesting because Zapdos isn't going to be able to knock out the Celesteela, but you have to expect the Tapu Fini on Jackson's end to switch because it doesn't have Protect.
Right.
Because it's clearly specs based off the damage it's been doing. So, I mean, yeah, you have to expect to switch out. So you could just double into the Celesteela right here and try to win.
Got a Manectric with the Intimidate coming out onto the Zapdos and the Fini. We're going to see how much damage it's going to take on there because that Celesteela, like you said, that Celesteela is still out there. That Zapdos has Thunderbolt.
The Tapu Fini switching out there makes total sense. You don't want to lose just by failing to do enough damage and then the Heavy Slam picking up the knockout onto the Metagross. Let's see if the Zapdos goes for a Tailwind. Yeah,
all right, cool.
That makes a whole bunch of sense just so that Patrick's going to be outspeeding everything, and he's going to be free to just double into whatever is next to the Celesteela.
Yeah.
Now, Patrick doesn't care about the Celesteela. The Celesteela isn't going to be the one getting the first knockout. It's the Manectric that can. And if Patrick has a variety of moves that Metagross can potentially use that are going to be able to knock out the Manectric. So right now, if you're Patrick, you're just got to double into the Manectric.
Yeah, you're just going to use that Tailwind to the best of your advantage. Not
Absolutely.
About
Yeah,
well, we do know Manectric has Protect as well, so Jackson has the opportunity to stall out and do some sort of damage.
Yeah, but we know what Celesteela's moves are. It has Heavy Slam, Acrobatics, and Leech Seed. All of those moves you don't care about right now. They're not doing much damage at all to Zapdos or Metagross. You do see the Mega Evolve coming in, just wanting to get as much damage as possible. That could become trouble later if Jackson has the Landorus Teen back, because that could allow him to potentially survive it. You see the
Protect coming out on Jackson's
but
side.
if Metagross has Stomping Tantrum, which it's known to run, that could become a deficit for him.
Oh, Ice Punch coming out into the Celesteela.
Oh, wow. Okay, he
Doing
goes for the
some
Heat
damage.
Wave instead, so he doesn't... That's not going to be able to knock out the Celesteela, but it is going to get it at dangerously low health.
Oh.
I mean...
So, like,
eh.
I mean, it would have been nice, I think, to be able to sell out for the Celesteela or
It would
switch out for something
have been
else.
nice to get more HP, for sure. But as is, I think if you're Patrick, you have to be happy with this spot. I mean, like, you could just double down into the Manectric, potentially pick up a knockout if you have the right moves onto Metagross. But I mean, if you don't have the right moves, then a potential switch out from Jackson could give him momentum going. You see the Celesteela going out into the Landorus T. So right now, Jackson's just banking on being able to survive the double up, which it might be able to do. But then from there, can it do enough damage to take out a knockout? I don't think so. Then it still has to contend with the tail end coming out. You see the Stomping Tantrum coming up. That's going to be super effective, doing a good amount of damage to the Manectric.
Super close. Oh, are we going to get...
Is Heat Wave going to knock it out? It's going to be close.
And...
It does KO,
Yes,
and Patrick
knockout.
wins.
Man, sudden death is very stressful.
Yeah, I think you could say that.
It's stressful on this side, but like I can't imagine what the players are thinking because you've got that console like switching
Oh yeah,
on there.
I mean it's an entirely different game because you're not just playing to sack Pokemon to set things up, and you can't afford to play safe. You can't afford. Well, I guess another way to say it is you have to play incredibly safe because if you take the risk that a Pokemon gets KO'd, you can't recover from that. And what that means is you can't set up positions where it's okay if a Pokemon dies. So, I don't know.
I think it's one of the things where it takes conserving Pokemon to a different level in like this.
Yeah, exactly. It's just very different.
But I don't think there's much that Jackson could have done like with the Manectric and the Landorus out unless like he continually cycled to switch. But with doing that, you know, he had the two Pokemon in the back that were already at dangerously low health. So
I think what Jackson needed to do there was just not get into Celesteela because Celesteela is just a liability in a game where, I mean, Celesteela, we saw that in the games that Jackson won and in the second/third game, technically. Celesteela excels in taking on those 1v2s or 1v3s. But the thing is, if you're in sudden death, if you're in a 1v3, you've already lost the game. So I think that Jackson just couldn't afford to switch Celesteela in. He had to play along with Manectric Landorus if he wanted a chance there. But hey, congrats to Patrick. That was, I don't know about you, that was a much more exciting first round than I expected.
I mean, when you've got like really good players and like you've got stuff like that to happen to recover from, definitely exciting round.
Yeah, I think that everyone else is finished too.
Alright, so we'll see you guys relatively soon. Yeah.